my name ain't falling. Every weight on my back, still I stand here tall. Moving through the motion, still giving it my all.
There's a woman I know, let's call her Rachel, who spent $12,000 last year on spiritual development. Let me break that down for you. Meditation app subscription, $70 a month. Online spiritual courses, $3,000. Crystals, sage, singing bowls, altar supplies, $800. 3 weekend retreats, $4,500. Energy healing sessions, $2,400. Astrology readings, $600. And various books, oracle decks, and wellness supplements, another $730. $12,000. And when I asked her how she was doing, like really doing, she said, I don't know, Pastor Carey. I'm doing all the things. I meditate every morning. I've taken so many courses. I have all the tools, but I still feel empty, like I'm performing spirituality instead of actually being spiritual. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense because Rachel isn't alone. She's part of a phenomenon that's both fascinating and deeply concerning. The explosion of the spiritual marketplace. The global spiritual and wellness products market was valued at $4.2 billion in 2023 and is projected to reach $9.6 billion in 2034. Its spiritual wellness apps alone make $2.16 in 2024, expected to reach a double that in 2030. That's billions with a B being spent on spiritual awakening. And here's my question. If we're spending more on spirituality than ever before, why are we collectively feeling worse than ever before? I'm Pastor Carey, and this is The Frequency Arc, Episode 3. Today, we're going to talk about something that might make some of you uncomfortable. We're going to examine the commercialization of consciousness, the commodification of awakening, the difference between spiritual seeking and spiritual consuming. And we're going to ask the hard questions. What are we really buying when we purchase spiritual products? Why has awakening become something we think we can purchase on Amazon? And what's the cost, not just financially, but spiritually, of treating consciousness like a commodity? Because after 30 years in this work, I can tell you, every marketplace boom in spirituality signals a famine in authentic connection. Every explosion of spiritual commerce reveals a hunger that can't actually be satisfied by consumption. Let's dive in. Let me give you the full scope of what we're dealing with, where the global spiritual services market was valued at $376 billion in 2024 and is estimated to reach $787 billion by 2035. That's not a typo. $367 billion for spiritual services alone, not even counting products. North America dominates this market, accounting for 44% of global revenue. Over 65% of millennials are now investing in spiritual wellness. Meditation apps account for 96% of total users in the mental health app market. Let that sink in for a moment. We're living through the largest commercialization of spirituality in human history. More money is being spent on awakening, enlightening, and consciousness than at any point in recorded time. Now you might be thinking, well, Pastor Carey, isn't that good? Doesn't that mean people are seeking, that consciousness is becoming mainstream, that mental health and spiritual well-being are being taken seriously? And yes, there's some truth to that. The destigmatization of therapy, meditation, and spiritual practice is genuinely positive. The fact that you can now talk about consciousness work in corporate boardrooms, not just monasteries, that's progress. But this is a big but. We need to ask, what are we actually getting for this money? And perhaps more importantly, what are we not getting? Let me tell you what I see happening. People are treating spirituality like any other consumer category. They're scrolling through apps like they're ordering food. I'll take enlightenment, extra mindfulness, and hold the suffering, please. They're accumulating courses like they're collecting baseball cards. I've taken 17 courses on consciousness. I must be conscious by now, right? They're stacking products, crystals, meditation cushions, essential oils, Tibetan singing bowls, like spiritual achievement badges. Look at my altar. See how spiritual I am? And I'm not mocking these practices. Crystals are beautiful. Meditation cushions are helpful. Essential oils smell lovely. And courses can provide genuine wisdom. But here's the problem. When you approach spirituality as consumption, you bring consumer consciousness to it. And consumer consciousness is fundamentally at odds with spiritual consciousness. Consumer consciousness says, more is better. Spiritual consciousness says, less is more. Consumer consciousness says, accumulate, acquire, possess. Spiritual consciousness says, release, surrender, let go. Consumer consciousness says, I need something external to make me whole. Spiritual consciousness says, you're already whole. You just need to remember. Let me give you a specific example. There's been a 35% rise in AI astrology users, and over 60% of consumers now prefer personalized astrology readings, manifestation coaching, and customized meditation guides. Think about what that means. People are paying for artificial intelligence to tell them who they are. They're outsourcing self-knowledge to algorithms. Now, I'm not anti-technology. AI can be a tool. Astrology can be a framework for self-reflection. But when you're paying monthly for an app to tell you your purpose, your patterns, your path, what you're actually doing is abdicating responsibility for knowing yourself. The irony is profound. You're paying money to avoid doing the free work of actually sitting with yourself, of actually feeling your feelings, of actually asking yourself the hard questions that no app can answer for you. Now, the spiritual marketplace offers convenience, but awakening has never been convenient. It offers comfort, but transformation has never been comfortable. It offers instant gratification, but consciousness has never been instant. Here's another data point that tells you everything you need to know. Over 70% of consumers discover new spiritual products through social media. Social media, the place where we perform identity, where we curate image, where we present idealized versions of ourselves while hiding the messy reality. That's where most people are now discovering spirituality, not through genuine seeking, not through crisis that breaks them open, not through authentic encounters with teachers or practices, but through algorithmic recommendations designed to keep them scrolling and engaged and consuming. Based on your previous purchases, you might also like Enlightenment 2.0, now with added mindfulness. It's absurd, and it's everywhere. Now, let me be clear about something. I'm not saying everyone spending money on spirituality is doing it wrong. Some courses are genuinely valuable. Some teachers are genuinely wise. Some apps genuinely help people establish practices they wouldn't otherwise maintain. What I'm saying is this: the explosion of the spiritual marketplace isn't primarily driven by genuine seeking. It's driven by something else, by the same forces driving all consumption in late capitalism. The manufactured sense that you're incomplete and that purchasing the right product will complete you. The spiritual marketplace has taken the deepest human longing, the longing for wholeness, for meaning, for connection to something larger than ourselves, and turned it into a profit center. Ching ching. And the tragic thing, it's working. People are buying billions of dollars worth of buying. They're not actually awakening. They're just accumulating spiritual inventory. Now we get to the heart of it. The thing that makes the commercialization of spirituality not just questionable, but potentially harmful: spiritual bypassing. The term was introduced in the mid 1980s by John Welwood. He's a Buddhist teacher and psychotherapist. He used it to describe a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. Read that again. Using spiritual practices to avoid doing the actual work. And that's exactly what the spiritual marketplace enables. It offers products and practices that make you feel like you're working on yourself when you're actually avoiding yourself. Let me give you some examples. Example one: good vibes only culture. You see it everywhere. T-shirts that say, choose joy. Instagram posts that say, don't let anyone dim your light. Meditation apps that promise to help you rise above negativity. Sounds positive, right? Uplifting. But here's what it actually is: spiritual bypassing through overemphasizing the positive and avoiding the negative. It's using positivity as a weapon against your own pain and pretending everything is okay when it's not. When spiritual bypass is used as a long-term strategy for ignoring or suppressing unaddressed mental health issues, or negative consequences can include the need to excessively control others and oneself, shame, anxiety, emotional confusion, codependence, and disregard for personal responsibility. That choose joy mantra is making your depression worse, not better. Because every time you can't choose joy, which is most of the time when you're depressed, you're failing. You're not spiritual enough. You're not trying hard enough. You're doing it wrong. And so you buy another course, another app, another crystal, hoping this one will finally make you joyful enough, light enough, positive enough. But the problem wasn't that you weren't trying hard enough. The problem is you're trying to bypass your actual experience instead of meeting it. Example two: the everything happens for a reason bypass. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people in genuine pain, real suffering, be told by well-meaning spiritual people, everything happens for a reason. The universe is teaching you something. This is part of your spiritual growth. When spirituality is used as an escape, defense mechanism, or means of shielding us from the truth, it's spiritual bypassing. Sometimes terrible things happen and there's no reason. Sometimes people suffer and it's not a lesson. Sometimes life is just brutally unfair, and the only appropriate response is to feel that fully: the grief, the rage, the injustice, not to spiritualize it away. The spiritual marketplace loves this bypass because it's comforting. It makes chaos feel meaningful. It makes suffering feel purposeful. And people will pay good money to believe their pain means something. But here's the truth: meaning isn't something you discover in your suffering. Meaning is something you create through how you respond to suffering. And you can't respond authentically if you're bypassing the actual experience. Example 3, the detachment bypass. Many traditions teach non-attachment, but it's commonly misapplied. See, from an absolute perspective, one may get the idea that they don't need material possessions or relationships. Yet, from a relative perspective, everyone needs healthy attachments and relationships. I've watched people use meditation and spiritual practice to become emotionally unavailable. They call it detachment or equanimity. They say they're not affected because they're not attached. But what they're actually doing is protecting themselves from intimacy, from vulnerability, from the risk of being hurt. And the spiritual marketplace reinforces this because emotional detachment is marketable. Be untouchable. Be unaffected. Rise above the drama. It sounds sophisticated, evolved, conscious, but it's not. It's just another form of fear. Fear of feeling, fear of connection, fear of being human. In effect, identifying oneself as a spiritual practitioner becomes used as a way of avoiding a depth of spiritual engagement with others that might stir up old wounds and longings for love. Example 4. This might sting, the I'm doing the work bypass. People will spend thousands on courses, therapy, workshops, retreats. They'll talk extensively about doing their work. They'll use all the right language: shadow work, inner child healing, nervous system regulation, and all that can be genuine. All that can be valuable. But sometimes, and I see this a lot, doing the work becomes a way of avoiding actually changing. You're always in process, always discovering new layers, always finding new trauma to heal, always needing another workshop, another course, another healer. And I'm not saying healing isn't layered or complex. It absolutely is. I'm not saying there aren't legitimate reasons to work with multiple teachers or modalities. There absolutely are. What I'm saying is, at some point, you have to actually integrate. At some point, the work has to translate into different behavior, different relationships, different ways of being in the world. If you've been doing the work for 10 years and your life hasn't changed, your patterns haven't shifted, your relationships haven't improved, your capacity for presence hasn't increased, then you're not doing the work. You're consuming content about the work. And the spiritual marketplace loves that because consumed content is renewable revenue. Actual transformation, that's a one-time purchase. Now you might be feeling defensive, but Pastor Carey, I really am doing the work. I really have been helped by courses and by apps and teachers. And I believe you. I'm not saying all spiritual commerce is bypassing. I'm saying the structure of the marketplace encourages bypassing because bypassing is more profitable than awakening. Awakening would mean you stop needing products. Bypassing means you keep coming back for more. So why are we doing this? Why are we treating spirituality like shopping? Here's my theory, based on 30 years of watching this unfold. First, we're living in a consumer culture where consumption is how we solve problems. Feeling anxious? Buy these supplements. Feeling lonely? Buy this dating app. Feeling purposeless? Buy the spiritual course. We've been trained since birth that problems are solved through purchasing, that discomfort is solved through acquisition, that wholeness comes from having the right things. And the spiritual marketplace has simply adapted that model. Feeling disconnected from yourself? There's an app for that. Feeling disconnected from purpose? There's a course for that. Feeling disconnected from the divine? There's a crystal for that. It's the same mechanism, just the different products. Second, we're time starved and exhausted. Real spiritual practice takes time. It takes consistency. It takes showing up daily, even when you don't feel like it, even when nothing dramatic happens, even when you're bored or uncomfortable or questioning if it's working. But who has time for that? Who has energy for that when you're already working 50 hours a week, managing a family, trying to stay physically healthy, trying to maintain relationships, trying to just survive? So we buy convenience, shortcuts, 10-minute meditation sessions, pre-packaged enlightenment, spirituality that fits into our busy schedule without requiring us to actually change our busy schedule. But here's the thing, you can't microdose awakening. You can't shortcut consciousness. The time requirement isn't a bug, it's a feature. The practice is the point. The daily showing up is the transformation. When you try to make spirituality convenient, you strip it of its transformative power. Third, and this is crucial, we're trying to individual solution a collective problem. Remember episode 1, the architecture of disconnection? The systems that make genuine connection difficult? The spiritual marketplace offers individual solutions. Meditate your way out of loneliness. Manifest your way out of economic precarity. Positive think your way out of systemic oppression. But you can't individual solution systemic problems. Your anxiety isn't just your neurochemistry. It's an appropriate response to living in a society designed to make you anxious. Your depression isn't just your psychology. It's a sane reaction to a world that often feels meaningless and unfair. And no meditation app, no matter how sophisticated, can fix that. Because the problem isn't in you, the problem is in the architecture. But the spiritual marketplace wants you to believe the problem is in you. Because if the problem is in you, then the solution can be sold to you. If the problem is systemic, well, systems can't be fixed through consumption. Systems are fixed through collective action, political engagement, structural change, none of which is profitable to the spiritual marketplace. So we're sold the lie that if we just buy the right products, do the right practices, take the right courses, we'll transcend the broken systems we're living in. But transcendence isn't the same as transformation. Transcendence means rising above. Transformation means changing what is. Fourth, we're lonely, desperately lonely. And the spiritual marketplace offers community. But here's what it actually offers: consumption, based affiliation. You're part of a group that uses this app. You're part of the community that follows this teacher. You're part of the tribe that believes these things. That's not the same as genuine community. Genuine community requires showing up, being vulnerable, being known, being accountable, being in relationship through conflict and difficulty and the messy reality of human connection. Consumption-based affiliation requires none of that. You can feel like you belong without ever actually belonging. You can feel like you're a part of something without actually being known by anyone. And the marketplace loves that because genuine community is free. Genuine community happens when people gather consistently, commit to each other, work through difficulties together. You can't monetize that. Well, you can try, but it's much less profitable than selling individual consumption disguised as community. So here's what we end up with: billions of dollars spent on spirituality, millions of people consuming spiritual content, and yet collectively, we're not actually becoming more conscious, more present, more compassionate, more connected. We're just becoming better spiritual consumers. And that should alarm all of us. All right, deep breath, because I know this has been challenging. Maybe some of you are feeling called out. Maybe some of you are feeling defensive. Maybe some of you are thinking, great, PK, you've just made me feel terrible about every spiritual thing I ever purchased. Thanks for that. And so let me be really clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying spiritual commerce is inherently bad. I'm not saying teachers shouldn't be paid. I'm not saying technology can't support practice. I'm not saying everyone who buys a meditation app or takes an online course is spiritually bypassing. What I'm saying is this: we need to be conscious about our relationship with the spiritual marketplace. We need to ask ourselves why we're consuming what we're consuming. We need to examine whether we're genuinely seeking or just accumulating spiritual inventory. Because consciousness isn't something you can purchase, it's something you practice. And practice looks different than consumption. So, what do I see as possible? What's the way through this? Well, first, discernment over accumulation. Before you buy the next course or the app or a crystal or retreat, ask yourself, why do I want this? What am I hoping it will do for me? Am I seeking genuine transformation or temporary comfort? Am I avoiding something by focusing on this? See, the foundation of spiritual bypassing is basically avoidance and repression. So get honest with yourself about what you might be avoiding. And here's a radical idea: before you consume more spiritual content, actually practice what you already know. If you've taken 5 courses on meditation, have you actually meditated daily for 6 months? If you own 12 books on consciousness, have you actually integrated the teachings from even one of them? What I see as possible is people shifting from horizontal accumulation, more teachers, more practices, more products, to vertical deepening, going deeper with less, committing to one practice, one teacher, one path, long enough for it to actually transform you, because depth comes from commitment, not from variety. Transformation comes from practice, not from consumption. And second, relationship over transaction. Real spiritual growth happens in a relationship, not just with teachers, but with community, with accountability partners, with people who know you well enough to call you out when you're bypassing, when you're performing, when you're avoiding. What I see as possible is people building or joining genuine spiritual communities, not consumption based affiliations where you follow the same influencer, but actual communities where you show up consistently, where you're vulnerable, where you work through conflict, where you're accountable. And here's what's beautiful about genuine community: it's mostly free. It requires time and commitment, not money. It requires showing up, not purchasing. Now, I'm building something like this at the Frequency Arc. And yes, there's a membership fee because creating quality content and maintaining infrastructure costs money. But the point isn't the transaction, the point is the relationship, the ongoing commitment, the mutual accountability. That's different than consuming courses and moving on. That's different than buying products and accumulating accumulating things. That's relationship based growth, not transaction based consumption. And third, simplicity over complexity. The spiritual marketplace thrives on complexity. There's always a new modality, a new framework, a new synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern science, and all of it promises to be the missing piece you need. But the truth, the deepest spiritual teachings are remarkably simple. Be present, feel your feelings, question your thoughts, act with compassion, let go of what doesn't serve you, show up for what matters, repeat daily. That's it. That's the work. Everything else is elaboration. What I see as possible is people returning to simplicity, choosing one practice, meditation, prayer, journaling, yoga, whatever resonates, and just doing it daily without needing it to be complicated or special or Instagram worthy, because the practice itself is the teacher, not the course about the practice. The practice. And the practice is free. Sitting is free. Breathing is free. Presence is free. The marketplace wants you to forget that, but it's true. And fourth, we're drowning in spiritual information. Podcasts, books, courses, apps, social media posts. Everyone has teachings to share, frameworks to offer, wisdom to impart. And some of it is genuinely valuable. But information without integration is just noise. And I see as people that we need to slow down, taking less information and integrating it more deeply, using one book, actually practicing what it teaches before moving to the next, taking one course and letting it change you before accumulating more knowledge. Because consciousness doesn't come from knowing more, it comes from being more. And being more requires integration, not accumulation. Fifth, authenticity over performance. 70% of spiritual product now through is discovered through the social media. What does that mean? Most people's spiritual practices are being shaped by what looks good on Instagram, not by what actually works for them. They're choosing practices, products, aesthetics based on performance value, based on how spiritual it makes them look, not how spiritual it makes them be. What I see as possible is people claiming their authentic spiritual path, the one that might not be photogenic, the one that doesn't fit current trends, the one that's messy and imperfect and deeply real. Maybe your spiritual practice is washing dishes mindfully. Maybe it's having difficult conversations with your teenagers. Maybe it's sitting in traffic without road rage. Maybe it's showing up for your grief instead of spiritualizing it away. That's not Instagram worthy, but it's real. And real is what transforms. Six, free practices over purchased products. I want to be really clear about this. The most powerful spiritual practices are free. Sitting in silence, walking in nature, deep breathing, journaling, genuine conversation, acts of service, gratitude, presence, all free, all accessible, all transformative. What I see as possible is people reclaiming these free practices, recognizing, recognizing what I see as possible is people reclaiming these free practices, recognizing that you don't need special equipment or expensive apps or exclusive access to awaken. You need yourself, your attention, your willingness, your consistency. That's it. Everything else is optional. Now, does that mean you should never purchase spiritual resources? No. Some teachings are worth paying for. Some teachers deserve compensation. Some tools genuinely help. What I'm saying is don't mistake purchasing for practicing. Don't confuse consuming for awakening. Don't let the marketplace convince you that transformation costs money. The most profound shifts I've witnessed in 30 years, including my own, have come from free practices done with commitment and sincerity. And seventh, shadow work over spiritual bypass. Real awakening requires facing what you've been avoiding: unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. That's the work. Not the comfortable work, not the Instagrammable work, the real work. What I see as possible is people getting honest about what they're avoiding, what they're using spiritual practice to bypass, what they're afraid to feel. And then, and this is crucial, actually feeling it, actually facing it, not with a fancy app or expensive healer, though those might help, but with courage, with presence, with willingness to sit with discomfort. Because consciousness isn't about feeling better, it's about feeling, period. All of it, the full range of human experience, without bypassing, without numbing, without spiritualizing it away. That's the work the marketplace can't sell you, because it's not a product, it's a practice, it's a commitment, it's a daily choice to show up for your own experience, however uncomfortable. Eighth, collective action over individual transcendence. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, what I see as possible is people recognizing that personal awakening is necessary but not sufficient. We need individual consciousness, and we need collective transformation. We need people doing their inner work, and we need people organizing, advocating, building new systems, creating structural change. The spiritual marketplace wants you to believe that if you just work on yourself enough, if you just raise your vibration enough, if you just manifest abundantly enough, everything else will fall into place. But that's not how systems work. Broken systems don't heal through individual transcendence, they heal through collective action. What I see as possible is spiritually awake people bringing their consciousness to social engagement, use their presence for justice work, using their compassion for advocacy, using their clarity for system change, not as separate activities. Spiritual practice over here, political action over there, but as integrated consciousness, where your inner work fuels your outer work, and your outer work deepens your inner work. That's the consciousness we actually need right now. Not people meditating on mountains away from the world, but people meditating in the mess of the world, then acting from that clarity. Look, I know the marketplace is seductive. I know it's easier to buy a course than to sit with yourself. I know it's more comfortable to accumulate spiritual inventory than to do the actual work. But after 30 years, I can promise you this: real transformation isn't for sale. Real awakening isn't on Amazon. Real consciousness can't be purchased. It can be practiced daily, imperfectly, authentically. And that's actually good news, because it means you already have access to everything you need. You don't need more. You need commitment to what you already have. So here's your question to carry forward this week. What am I using my spiritual practice to avoid? Not what am I seeking. We know what you're seeking: awakening, peace, wholeness, connection. But what are you avoiding? What uncomfortable truth, difficult emotion, unresolved wound, or unfinished developmental task are you sidestepping through spiritual practice or spiritual consumption? Sit with that question. And I mean, really sit with it. Not in a 5-minute meditation between meetings. No, but in genuine, uncomfortable inquiry. Write about it. Talk about it with someone who knows you well. Notice when you feel the impulse to buy something spiritual. What are you feeling right before that impulse? What are you trying to fix, soothe, or avoid? Because consciousness begins with seeing clearly. You can't see clearly if you're constantly distracting yourself with spiritual consumption. I want to address something directly here. Some of you might be thinking, okay, Pastor Carey, you've just torn down the whole spiritual marketplace. You've made me question everything I've purchased. You've made me feel like I've been doing it wrong. And now what? What am I supposed to do? First, if you're feeling defensive or upset, that's okay. That's actually information. What's been activated? What's feeling threatened? Sit with that. That's where the work is. Second, I'm not saying you've been doing it wrong. I'm saying we've all been swimming in consumer consciousness so long that we don't even recognize it anymore. We're all susceptible to spiritual bypassing. We're all capable of confusing consumption with transformation. Recognizing it is the first step, not the shame, with clarity. Third, you don't have to throw everything away. If a particular app helps you maintain a practice, use it. If a particular teacher has genuinely transformed you, stay with them. If a particular crystal brings you joy and reminds you to be present, keep it. The question isn't if this product is good or bad. The question is, what's my relationship to it? Am I using this as a support for genuine practice or as a substitute for it? And this brings me to what we're building at the Frequency Arc. Here's what we're not doing. We're not selling you transformation. We're not promising enlightenment in 6 easy steps. We're not offering spiritual products you accumulate and move on from. Here's what we're doing. We're creating a community for genuine practice, a space where you can develop real consciousness, not perform spiritual identity, a place where you're supported in doing the actual work, not consuming content about the work. So visit thefrequencyarc.org. When you become a member, you get access to courses that are designed for integration, not just information. Each course is meant to be lived with for weeks or months, not consumed in a weekend. Each course includes practices you actually do, not just concepts you learn about. We're building a library of resources that support genuine development, understanding trauma, developing emotional intelligence, building communication skills, practicing presence, also engaging conflict consciously. All the things that actually support awakening, not just spiritual performance. And as our community grows, we're organizing discussion groups, workshops, where you can practice these skills with real humans, where you can be accountable, where you can be vulnerable, where you can work through the messy reality of applying consciousness to daily life. We're creating workshops where you don't just learn about shadow work, you actually do it. When you don't just talk about presence, you practice it together. And eventually we'll offer retreats, but not Instagram-worthy escapes. Real retreats where you go deep, where you face what you've been avoiding, where you leave different than you arrived. This is different than spiritual consumption because it's relationship-based, not transaction-based. It's community-centered, not individual-focused. It's practice-oriented, not content-driven. And yes, it sometimes costs money because maintaining infrastructure, creating quality resources, and compensating teachers fairly all costs money. But what you're paying for isn't enlightenment. It's support, structure, community, accountability, resources that help you do the free work of genuine awakening. Does that make sense? You're not buying transformation. You're investing in the conditions that support transformation. And then you have to do the actual work. Here's what I want you to understand. We're building this because the spiritual marketplace has failed us. It's given us products, but not practices. Performance, but not presence. Information, but not integration. And we need something different. We need spaces where awakening isn't commodified, but supported. Where consciousness isn't performed, but practiced. Where community isn't consumed, but created. That's what the frequency arc is becoming. And we need you. Not your money primarily, though that helps sustain the work. We need your commitment, your willingness to practice, your courage to face what you've been avoiding, your authenticity in a world of spiritual performance. We need people who are done accumulating and ready to integrate, done consuming and ready to commit, done performing and ready to be real. If that's you, come join us. thefrequencyarc.org. Become a member. Get access to the resources. Join the community. Show up for the practices. And then, and this is crucial, actually do the work. Not for Instagram, not for spiritual achievement points, but for genuine transformation. And if you can't afford membership right now, that's okay too. You don't need us. You already have everything required for awakening. Yourself, your breath, your attention, your willingness. Take one practice, meditation, journaling, mindful walking, whatever calls to you, or whatever resonates, and commit to it daily for 6 months. Not perfectly, not Instagram worthily, just consistently. That will transform you more than $12,000 worth of spiritual products. I promise. One more thing. If you've spent money on spiritual products or courses and now you're feeling shame about it, let me be clear. Don't. There's no shame in seeking. There's no shame in trying different paths. There's no shame in being human in a consumer culture. What matters is what you do moving forward. Do you keep accumulating or do you start integrating? Do you keep consuming or do you start practicing? That choice is available right now, in this moment. It doesn't require undoing the past, just showing up differently in the present. Next week, we're diving into something that might surprise you, your nervous system. We're going to explore why your anxiety isn't overreacting, why your body knows things your mind denies, and why you can't think your way to wholeness. You have to feel your way there. We're going to talk about trauma, about safety, about the wisdom of sensation, about how consciousness isn't just something you cultivate in your mind, but something you embody, literally. It's going to be grounding, somatic, real, and is going to give you practical tools for working with your nervous system instead of fighting against it. So until then, remember, you already have everything you need for awakening. The marketplace doesn't want you to know that, but it's true. Simplify, practice, commit, integrate. That's the path. It's always been the path. I'm Pastor Carey. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your willingness to examine your relationship with spiritual consumption. And thank you for choosing genuine practice over spiritual performance. You're not accumulating spiritual inventory anymore. You're becoming conscious. And that changes everything.
Woke up early, but the world ain't calling. Clock keeps spinning, but my name ain't falling. Every weight on my back, still I stand here tall. Moving through the motion, still giving it my all. I'm busy with the grind, it don't grind with me. Pushing every hour, but time won't set me free. I'm chasing every dollar, though it don't chase me back. I'm busy with the world, but the world's still off track. Streetlights hum, but they don't know my tune. Crowds come and go, but they leave by noon. I speak my truth, but the echo stays still. I'm busy with the climb, but the summit's uphill. I'm busy with the grind, but it don't grind with me. Pushing every hour, but time won't set me free. I'm chasing every dollar, though it don't chase me back. I'm busy with the world, but the world's still off track. Smoke in my mind, but the fire ain't mine. Carrying weight of years that ain't even my time. I roll with the tide, yet it won't roll with me. Making moves in a game where I can't hold the key. I'm busy with the grind, it don't grind with me. Pushing every hour, but time won't set me free. I'm chasing every dollar, though it don't chase me back. I'm busy with the world, but the world's still off track. I'm busy with the grind, it don't grind with me. Pushing every